Premier Smith, thanks for the time. Thanks for agreeing to sit down with us
my
today
pleasure.
while you're in town. I thought that I was going to be talking to you about your big ad campaign that you've been running here in Ontario, on billboards, on TV, on radio. I thought I'd be talking to you about your speech. But there's been a bunch of things happened over the last little while since this speech was planned. Let's talk about your reaction to yesterday, the crisis in the federal government. We've had people call for the Prime Minister to resign, to call an election, that there needs to be new leadership. Are you making those kinds of calls publicly?
Well, I've thought that for some time we need to have a new election. If you're going to go toe-to-toe with the U.S. president, you need to say, I got a 4-year mandate, and you're stuck dealing with me. And he can't say that right now. We don't know day to day whether or not he's going to survive his leadership. We don't know when the election's going to be called. We don't know who the people are that are going to be the lead on being at the negotiating table. And it's creating unnecessary uncertainty, not only for the provinces, because we also have a role in making sure that the border stays open and tariff-free, but also for every business that is looking at doing investment in our country. The uncertainty and the chaos is not helpful. And so I would say that we need to go to an election.
The Prime Minister doesn't seem to agree with you. He seems to want to keep on carrying on. But in the United States, Donald Trump has obviously been watching. And he was commenting on Chrystia Freeland's resignation, saying that the governor of the great state of Canada lost his finance minister and then had some unpleasant things to say about her. We can get angry about what Donald Trump says, or we can laugh at it. Whatever the case, he is coming in and he's making these threats and he's paying attention, and he knows that the current government is weak.
Yeah, we do not want to be on the president-elect's radar screen in this way. I think we all know that China is a problem because they're undercutting both of our manufacturing sectors. We know that Mexico has also been allowing China to be a backdoor to bring cheap goods into North America, I think in violation of the spirit of the agreement. That's what we would like to jointly be focused on, is how do we address those issues. But to have this inner turmoil, which is threatening our ability to get to the table and have a serious discussion, I don't think it benefits anyone. If there's a 25% tariff, it's going to impact our ability to continue to maintain our market share. It's going to be devastating for our economy. It's devastating especially for our manufactured goods. But if we end up then doing tit for tat and having 25% tariffs on American goods coming into Canada when we're in the middle of an inflation crisis and an affordability crisis, that's terrible for Canadian consumers. So we need to get to the table to avoid tariffs altogether. And that's what I think the premiers were focused on yesterday.
The issue of oil,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the oil coming out of your province is graded at Western Canadian Select. Already trades at about a 20% discount to West Texas Intermediate. You put a 25% tariff on it, suddenly it's more expensive than West Texas. It's almost as expensive as Brent. And what impact would that have on Alberta?
Well, we're not sure. I mean, it would take some time, I think, for the Americans to be able to try to find additional sources of that energy. And here's the thing, there aren't very many good sources for heavy oil. Heavy oil has the benefit of being able to make a number of products, including asphalt. And so many of the refineries in the US have been retooled specifically to receive heavy oil, and Canada's oil in particular. Their other options are Venezuela or Iraq or Iran, and our argument is we're a much better trading partner than any of those. So that's one of the realities that we're trying to make sure that Americans know, that by putting a 25% tariff on the 4.3 million barrels that go in from Canada, it's going to increase the price of gasoline probably by about a buck a gallon. And that's going to have a big impact on their inflation. And it's going to have an impact on their affordability crisis as well. So I think we have a very strong case to make. That's the case I make for oil. You can make an equal case for electricity. You don't want to see an 25% increase in power bills in the states that are reliant on power from Eastern Canada. The auto manufacturing and the parts go back and forth across the border 7 or 8 times before a car is assembled. That will just increase the cost of cars as well. So I would say that regardless of whether it's energy, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's food, we import a lot of American food products. There is no benefit to either Canadian consumers or American consumers in getting into a trade war. We've got to solve this.
Well, and I agree with that, and I think it's valuable to make that argument to Americans and always remind them of that. But Donald Trump came in with a very specific reason for why he's calling for these tariffs, saying that there's a problem with the border. If we just say, yes, but you know, we're great trading partners, don't do this to us, and we don't deal with the border. Well, that's kind of like your spouse being angry at you for leaving socks on the couch every day, and when they complain, you say, but honey, the garage is clean. You're not addressing the irritant. So you got to address the irritant. And 1.3 billion over 6 years doesn't seem like an awful lot to me. That's what the Trudeau government has promised. Very light on details so far. You've offered up a much more detailed plan. Wabkanu, Manitoba, offered up a more detailed plan. Francois Legault in Quebec, Doug Ford's talking about more specifics, not as much as you, but more specifics than the federal government. Are they taking this seriously?
I would say the conversation is yes and. Here are the reasons for our great trading partner, and we're going to secure the border, and here's how we're going to do it. That's the approach we're taking in Alberta.
And I think you've got to have both. If you just talk about the trade and don't deal with it, we're going to get hit with the tariffs.
Completely. So what we're doing in Alberta, $29 million, it allows us to hire 51 sheriffs. We're going to have sniffer dogs, so we're able to sniff out if there's an indication of drugs. We're going to have commercial vehicle inspection. We've been doing training over the last year and a half to be able to train a special division within our sheriffs. And we're also going to have a 2-kilometer zone that we will identify as critical infrastructure. And if you are heading into that zone or out of that zone, not using an official border crossing, we're just going to assume you're up to no good and you're going to be stopped and questioned. And so that's the way we think that we'll be able to, using drone technology and other aerial technology with these specialized teams, that we'll be able to provide some certainty that if there is a problem at the border, it's not happening between Alberta and Montana. Right now, we just don't know what we don't know. We know that there's an official border crossing. It's under-resourced. We only are able to check a small fraction of the vehicles going through. I think that we'll find out just how much the criminals are using our border, and then we'll be able to stop it. And this should be good not just for Americans. This is good for Canadians too. The reason we were able to announce is because we identified this problem in July of 2023, that we had to have specialized teams on fentanyl at the border. And so we were going to roll this out after our budget in March. We were just able to accelerate the plan. And I hope that with the federal resources, they'll be able to match us with the CBSA and maybe some of the other mechanisms that they have. And they'll also be able to roll this out across the entire country.
When you look at what the Americans are concerned about, you see numbers like 43,000 Indian nationals stopped going across the border. You have to know that some of that are people that we've allowed to come into our country with out-of-control student visas, temporary foreign workers. We've allowed people to come in. They are using Canada as a backdoor entryway to the United States. Unfortunately, I hear people like Dominic LeBlanc, who's now in charge of both the border and finances, downplay the idea and say, well, we're only 0.6% of the problem. If you use the American numbers, we've gone from less than 1% to more than 9% of the illegal border crossing problems. That's serious. So is the 87% over the last 3 years is the average for people on terror watch lists being stopped, coming from Canada, not Mexico. In your discussions with the Trudeau government, do you get a sense of urgency on this?
That's another area where I think that there has to be a sense of urgency, because you're quite right, is that proportionately, maybe Mexico is worse, we know that, but the trend is going in the wrong direction in Canada, and to such an extent that the Americans have taken notice. The Homeland Security office has taken notice.
Under Biden, they noticed.
So we should take it seriously, because you can imagine it from their perspective. So what if they only focus on Mexico, shut that off, and now all of a sudden Canada is being used as the entry point? Because that's what we're seeing in Mexico as well. In the past, I spoke with Governor of Montana, Giannaforte, about this, because he's gone down to the border to get an assessment of what's going on down there. And he said when he went down in the past, it was Mexican workers looking for a break in America. Now it's 140 different nationalities that are at the border, because the signal has been sent out to the world: if you want a cheap way to sneak into the United States, go to Mexico. We don't want to be that country. We don't want to have that same view of Canada, and that's why we have to act at the same time. As the border's being shut off in Mexico, we have to put serious effort on the border in Canada as well.
I think the number I heard for Canada, just to show that we're getting there, is 97 different nationalities coming across the border from Canada. Let me ask you about why you're here. You're speaking to the Empire Club. You're delivering a message about the importance of the oil and gas sector. while we've been talking about the border, you're facing threats to your biggest industry from the federal government, from internal. Which is worse, the combination of the carbon tax and the emissions cap, or the threat of tariffs?
One thing I would say is that at the event today, I'll be on a panel with Liberal Premier Andrew Furey, which says a couple of things. Number one, that it shows the collegiality of the Premier's table, that he and I can be on a panel together and have a lot of common cause, as you'll see. We also are both energy superpowers, right? I mean, Newfoundland and Labrador is the second largest exporter of energy, and so I think we share a lot of common interests there as well. But it certainly doesn't help, as we're trying to put forward a united front to the Americans, telling them we are your solution to energy security, energy affordability, to have the federal government stabbing us in the back saying, yeah, but we're going to put in an emissions cap which caps your production. And so we've been saying, you have to have a cohesive, coherent message. And the cohesive, coherent message should be, we're parking that because we know that we can reduce emissions without reducing production, and we're going to work with Alberta and Newfoundland and Labrador to be able to do that. We've been trying to get the feds to align with us since my very first call with Justin Trudeau. They continue to go down a track that is going to be damaging to our country, damaging to our relationship with the United States, and that's why we've invoked the Sovereignty Act, as we're just not going to stand for it.
You've also decided to try and win hearts and minds in central Canada, though, with the ad campaign. What prompted that? Why did you say, you know what, we've got to convince people outside of Alberta that this industry is worth fighting for, and it has an impact on your life?
Well, I think part of it is that people just want to be able to go to a gas station and the gasoline's there, in the same way that they want to be able to turn on their lights and the lights come on. And they don't really think that much about where their energy comes from. But when you think about where Ontario and Quebec's energy comes from, there's a pipeline, Enbridge, and they have a main line that comes down through Michigan, and Michigan gets a number of most of its propane, but then it comes back up and goes to Quebec. And so we need that Ontarians and Quebecers to know that their gasoline comes from Alberta, and that if you were to reduce that supply and start shutting in production, it's going to impact consumers in Ontario and Quebec. It's going to impact our entire country. We also are a generator of a lot of revenue for the federal government when they charge much higher corporate income taxes, much higher personal income taxes. So when we do well, Canada does well, and that is the source of a lot of transfers that go between different provinces. So we think that there's sort of a two-pronged approach that we want to take. We should be celebrating the fact that this is our largest industry, the energy industry. It's our largest export. It's our best point of leverage with the United States, and that's the Team Canada approach. I've said to Justin Trudeau that, yeah, we are absolutely on Team Canada, but we want Team Canada to be on Team Alberta, that understanding that Alberta is central to our affordability and our prosperity, as opposed to continually trying to shut it down as the feds have been trying to do for a number of years.
Well, I saw a stat recently that said the only two areas of real GDP growth are the energy sector and public service jobs. One of those creates wealth and one of those does not.
And, you know, one of the things, I mean, they are connected, because the more revenue you have, the more you're able to hire nurses and teachers and doctors and social workers to take care of your most vulnerable. And that's part of the reason why we know that there is a connection. Albertans understand this connection, and I think that's why there's such an appreciation for these sectors. We know that they are subsidizing the kind of lifestyle that we want to have and the kind of social programs that we want to have as well. You can't have one without the other. If you want a strong, robust public service that delivers what people need, you need to have a strong, robust private sector, and the energy industry drives a lot of that.
Premier Smith, thanks so much.
You bet. Thanks, Brian.